Hello, everybody. This past week, I had asked several people for some feedback on what we could do to make things a little bit smoother. And a few people had suggested maybe I could annotate some of the different things that we're seeing, such as videos or PowerPoints, just so we can make it look a little bit more like what it would be like when we were actually in class. So I'm going to quickly walk through one of our PowerPoints that you guys are going to be viewing this week. And if you don't want to have the complete annotated version, then you can just click on the PowerPoint, which is not annotated and doesn't have the additional information. So what you're going to notice is that we have a PowerPoint called World War I Propaganda for Distance Learning. We're going to go ahead and present this. How many of you have seen this image before? It's kind of freaky. He's just staring at you. So what are propaganda posters and how could they affect the war? According to the dictionary, the spreading of ideas, information, or even rumor for the purpose of helping or injuring an institution, a cause, or a person is propaganda. More simply, information that's spread for the purpose of promoting some cause. When we think about it, we actually see propaganda in a lot of different ways. We see propaganda in commercials all the time, where they're trying to sell us, for example, fast food or even cereal. Tony the Tiger is a propaganda machine as he's trying to sell his cereal. Where would these posters go and who would see them? So about 200,000 different designs were actually created during World War I, and most of these posters would come to places like a post office, a railroad station, schools, restaurants, retail stores, any place where there would be a lot of people that would be gathering. Movie theaters were not really that big in World War I, but eventually when we get to World War II, we're going to see movie theaters having propaganda posters around their areas all the time. There was an Office of War Information called the OWI, and they had a department called the Bureau of Graphics. And they were responsible for deciding which one of the designs would be used for the war effort. So artists from all around the country were encouraged to submit different designs and drawings to try to entice their fellow countrymen to be a part of the active war effort. And this also allowed the Office of War Information to not use their own labor to create these sort of things. And it gave them a wider array of opportunities and options to pick from. And in most cases, none of the artists actually got paid for their work, but most of them were just proud of the fact that they got their work featured on a propaganda poster for the government, and it was kind of their way to help the war effort. So since propaganda is designed to spread information about a cause, OWI needed to be able to play on emotion in order to catch the eye and heart of the viewer. And this can be done in several different ways. There's numerous variations. Some people will say there's 13 different points of propaganda. Others say 6 or 7. For the purpose of our discussion, we're just going to narrow it down to 4 major methods that were used to design propaganda. Before we discuss these 4 and see the samples, it's important to note that symbolism is a huge and critical part of each of these designs. Try to discover the symbolism, and we'll go through some of those things together in just a moment. Some of them are going to be really obvious, like an American flag. Others are going to be a little bit more subtle. So these are the 4 major types of propaganda that we're going to look at today. 1, to get young men to enlist in the armed services. Sorry, ladies, if you heard that. I didn't say to get young women to enlist. In 1914 to 1917, in that era, women still weren't able to take on these combat roles in the United States. In fact, that's going to happen decades later. The second one, encourage civilian men and women to volunteer for non-combat services. So we can discuss what some of those roles are in just a moment or two. We want to be able to raise money or get well-needed supplies to sustain the war effort. And number four, to vilify the enemy or to make them look stupid or murderous or evil. So if we take a look at this first one, we want to enlist men into the armed services. So this poster right off the bat is using some symbolism. Big word enlist, nice in red. You've got the American flag in the background. You've got the eagle on the staff sitting up here, the nation's bird. And down here you have a woman wearing a blue headband with stripes. And what we're going to find out, well, let's see, what do you think jumps out to you? What symbolism do you see? Does anything about this image look familiar to a different image that we looked at earlier in the year? Maybe American Progress. And for those of you who are like, I don't remember what American Progress was, what if I told you the floating giant lady? And that'll probably trigger your memory back to Manifest Destiny as the angel is making her way across the landscape, ushering in this progress with telegraph poles, with new technologies, with the bridges and the different ships and the railroads. And so just like she was floating above in that painting, we've now got this angelic figure with the white dress symbolizing the purity, and your ideal woman with the blonde hair, hourglass figure, showing off a little bit of leg. In the background, you have the different ships that are taking place. So this is the type of symbolism that we want and the inspiration that they're looking for in propaganda posters. And there's a closer look of the lady as she's leading people, presumably into battle. Look a little bit familiar? So what do we see in this one? What jumps out to you? To me, it's the guy just staring me down a little bit. He kind of looks a little bit creepy. This guy is your uncle and my uncle, Uncle Sam. So Uncle Sam he was drawn in the early 1900s for the propaganda poster, and he kind of takes on the image of a famous British guy who was doing something very similar, and that image dates back to the 1700s. So what emotions, what symbols do we see in the poster? Well, we definitely see the red, white, and blue border of the poster, the nation's colors. We see the hat, which is very reminiscent of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, by the early 1900s, was seen as a giant, this mythical being in American history that was able to preserve our country. So Uncle Sam is wearing the same style hat that Abraham Lincoln would have had. You've got the red bow tie, the white shirt, the blue blazer that he's wearing, red, white, and blue again. And if you look over here, you even notice this area, which kind of represents the United States flag, normally red and white stripes, but in this painting, kind of subtly drawn in there to indicate the flag. He says, I want you for the US Army, and then asks them to go to the nearest station. So what's really interesting is if you go anywhere from your device, Uncle Sam is still going to be staring at you and pointing directly at you. If I go way over here, he's going to be staring at me. If I go way over here, he's still staring at me. So try that a couple of times. The third kind is to encourage this, or excuse me, the second kind is to encourage civilian men and women to volunteer for the non-combat services. So as we take a look at what jumps out at us first, we've got a very, very gigantic looking nurse. She appears to be, I don't know, 50 stories tall, or maybe it's just the proximity and she's just a little bit closer to us. But if you look a little bit closer, look towards her hat, and you're going to notice a red cross. If you look on her lapel, you'll see a red cross. And if you look on her armband, you'll see a red cross. Nurses typically wear white. What emotions does this have? Graduate nurses, your country needs you. It's got that pull in which you're trying to say you're needed, you're wanted, you need to graduate. Because if you don't, people might die without your help. We need 5,000 by June. So it says, what's going on in the background? And as we look a little bit closer, we see some more symbolism. The Red Cross is still here. The American flag is here. And these are rows and rows of army barracks or houses for soldiers. And if we don't get more nurses by June, it's possible that these barracks houses are going to turn into morgues where American soldiers are going to be dying and dead. The third aspect, to encourage civilian men and women to volunteer for non-combat services. So when we look at this image, what really jumps out to you? To me, there's about 4 different things that really pop out at me. The yellow question mark strikes my eye first. And then I go up all the way to the crosses before I look at any of the words. The next thing that really jumps out to me, I see a white word, give, and a white word, lend. So that's kind of where my eye is shifting to before I even start to read any of this. They give their lives. Do you lend your savings? And the lives that they're talking about are the soldiers. They're giving their lives. Can you give $50, $100 to buy a Liberty bond to be able to provide these men with the tools that they're going to need and the weapons and the protection while they're at war? But there's a little bit more to this one as well. 2 days ago, we just had Easter Sunday. And for those who are Christian, it's one of the most holiest days in the entire calendar year. And we want to play off of something in this propaganda poster that's happening up here with these crosses. There's 3 large crosses, one bigger than the rest, sitting on top of a hill with a dark clouded background. Well, in Christianity, Jesus was crucified on top of a hill with 2 other sinners. So this image is showcasing the subtlety of trying to play on people's religious aspect. Give just a little. It'll help others. So those are some of the things we want to look for when we take a look at these different propaganda posters. In the fourth one, we're going to try to vilify. I need to change my wording up here. Sorry about that. Vilify the enemy. So in this instance, what do we see? What jumps out at you? To me, there's 3 things that really strike. First thing that pops out to me is the very large person. I jump down to the word Liberty bonds. And then I come back to this red word, hun. So as we're vilifying people, you're going to notice that sometimes propaganda uses derogatory, hurtful, or even racist words to kind of evoke that sense of anger or fear or distrust for other people. So in this sense, hun is a derogatory nickname used by Americans and the British to describe a German soldier. It means destructive, like a vandal, or barbaric even. And this poster is meant to get people to fear the Germans, not just fear German soldiers, but fear Germans. And that's kind of a big deal because in Minnesota and Wisconsin, we have a pretty high German population in the early 1900s. The name Westphal comes from the Westphalia Rhineland region, in Western Germany. And people like me, unless we were extremely supportive of the American effort in the beginning of World War I, could be belittled, chastised. We could have been cast out. We could have been beaten up just based off of where our ancestors were from. And we're going to see that theme play again in World War II. We're going to see that theme play out again in the Vietnam era. When we get into 9/11, we see that playing out, how different peoples are treated because one or two people might have the same characteristics and did something extremely horrible. We've been seeing that play out a little bit with the COVID-19 fears that's been happening, especially when we keep hearing the president refer to the virus as coming from one country and something we should fear. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in the near future too. This poster also has a second purpose. Just like that last one where we're trying to raise money, this one is too. It's bringing in the fear. But if we can get your money in form of a Liberty Bond, then we can provide our soldiers with different materials so this does not happen to our cities. He doesn't come with his bloody bayonet, his bloody fingers, ripping through the different towns. So as we review some of the techniques for effective propaganda, remember the main goal is really to play on a person's emotions. A sense of love for your country, a sense of duty, a sense of guilt, or even that sense of fear. All those emotions are going to start to build. And you're going to see these posters all around your community. You're going to see lots of them. Even if you're in a small town of only a few hundred people, you're probably going to be inundated with 3, 4, maybe even 10 of these different posters wherever you go. And that's the idea. It's to try to get people onto your side and either portray that sense of love of country, that sense of we need you to fulfill this duty, to make you feel guilty that you haven't given enough or you're not doing enough for that war effort, or to make you fear the enemy, because with fear can come great power and control as well. So later in this unit, you guys are going to be working on an activity. This looks like a lot on the screen right now, but basically you're going to get a choice between about 40 to 45 different propaganda posters. And what you're going to be doing is critically reviewing and analyzing those propagandas. Crap. There's a series of questions that I want you guys to answer for each of the different propaganda posters. And I do encourage you, put a lot of thought, effort, and energy into them. Really use description and detail to describe what's going on with each of the posters. See if you can find more hidden meanings behind them as well. Some of the symbols are going to be extremely obvious, but talk about them. Don't just say eagle, flag. Describe why the eagle's there, why the flag is there, what it's trying to do in an artistic sense. What does the government hope that the audience will do? What do you think the intended audience of the poster is for? Is it for 80-year-olds? Is it for housewives? Is it for little children who might have a father that's off at war? Is it for siblings who might have a brother or maybe have an uncle that's fighting at war? Is it trying to get people to do certain tasks? Those are the things that I want you to think about when we go through this PowerPoint and when we go through your propaganda assignment. So that's a quick look at what is going to take place during this unit. And I look forward to interacting with you guys a little bit more. And remember, you can always email me. Also want to remind you too that when you take a look at your grades, if you ever get anything less than a 3, I'm going to be giving you comments and give you suggestions or questions that you can answer to try to raise up your grade. In most instances, if you get a 3 or above, I'm also going to be making comments too, because I want your work to be validated. And so you can know that I've actually looked at it, given it thought, given it feedback. And sometimes I might even try to push you to that next level. So please do take a look at all the comments that are there as well. So there you go. That's the annotated version of the World War I propaganda lesson. So enjoy.